1. So the story starts in 2006, back when MySpace was very popular. My little sister, Baby, was very active on the site, remaking her profile, adding and chatting with random people daily. She started telling her friends she has a boyfriend named Marcus in Atlanta, and when his family comes to visit other family members, they would meet up. We lived in a small suburb outside of Chicago called Sauk Village. I scolded her about telling random people where we live and how dangerous it was. She stated she only told him what town. It's not like he could immediately find her. They continued speaking via MySpace and eventually text into 2007, when Marcus informed her he and his family would be in Chicago, and that they should definitely meet up to hang. She agreed but never spoke a word about it to anyone. The Friday spring break was set to start. I made it in the house after school and started my chores. It was weird because Baby would usually get home at the same time as me, as high school let out at 2:45, and she got out at 3:15. By 5 p.m. I noticed she has still not come home. I went searching for her, leaving the back door unlocked just in case she popped up while I was gone. I went to her friend's house who stayed 2 blocks away, and they said the last time we saw Baby was when school let out, and we were walking down the trail. I checked with her other friends and they all confirmed they had not seen her. While walking home, I noticed a black Nissan Altima with Georgia tags driving very slowly around my block. I got that weird feeling like static running from my ears to my feet. So I jumped the back gate and ran into my back door. I continued calling Baby's phone and family members. Then I heard the computer ping. I noticed Baby was still logged into MySpace, so I read her messages, thinking maybe there would be a clue there. The first few messages were her friends telling her I was looking for her, and she needed to get home before she got in trouble. But the fourth down was Marcus. The message read, "Baby, I'm on your block. I just saw you jump that fence. Why are you hiding from me?" I was shook. What did he mean he saw her jump a fence? So I read through their thread, and to my horror, I realized she had sent him pictures with both of us in it, and never clarified which one she was. Our mother didn't allow her to post pictures of herself on her profile, so it was very easy to assume she was whichever one you wanted her to be. While I was reading through the thread, I heard a car door slam, 2 male voices approaching my front door, and then I hear beating on my window. I go to my window since its light taps, and I can hear Baby's voice urging me to open the window. I open the window, she slides in and turns off the light, pulling my hand into the closet with her. She said Marcus is not 13 like he said. He is old, like 31. He saw me and asked where my sister was, so I've been avoiding the house. I scolded her and said she should have come home first. The banging on the door grew more intense. Then I heard footsteps on the back patio. I panicked because I couldn't remember if I locked the door or not. Just then my question was answered. I heard heavy footsteps coming down the stairs to the place that we were in. I took out my phone and called 911. I whispered my address to the police. I heard a voice say, "Baby, where are you?" with a sinister laugh to follow. A crack of light shone through the closet, which meant he was in my room. Tears started streaming down Baby's face. Then the person in the car started beeping the horn crazy. He ran out of the house and I heard tires peel off. Too scared to move, I put the phone back to my ear, and the operator said the police are outside. I refused to move. Actually, my legs refused to move. The police came downstairs and said, "Ladies, it's okay to come out now. The house is all clear." We ran out and jumped on the officer. We printed all of the messages and gave her login info to the investigators. The person left fingerprints on the door and wall, so they had fingerprints. We didn't hear too much after. Fast forward to 2018. I'm on Facebook, and I posted a transformation picture of Baby and I in a group. Then I went to work. When I got off, I had a message from someone named Marcus saying, "You got away once, but I will get you next time." I immediately put a request in to delete my profile. So to the creep Marcus from Atlanta, let's not meet. 2. When I was younger, I used to move around a lot. However, I primarily stayed in one county, just going from town to town. One of these places I lived in, though not very long, was when I was about 10 years old and I actually lived around things. I could walk to the library, 2 different gas stations, a couple of churches. That was pretty unusual for me. Anyway, it was getting close to summer vacation, and I just had a huge fight with my sister, which wasn't rare by any means. But it was big enough that my aunt, who had been babysitting us at the time, sent me off to go take a walk and cool down. I ended up walking to this fountain in town that was a couple of blocks away from where I lived. For a while I was just walking in circles around the fountain, playing in the water with my hands and taking coins just so I could throw them back in. In all honesty, I was probably a little more alert than I usually would have been because I was messing around with the coins, which I had definitely been yelled at before for doing, so I was afraid I was going to get in trouble. It was because of this. I was even paying attention to the people that were walking past, both near me and on the other side of the street. One man in particular had managed to get my attention the most, primarily because he only had one arm. However, I had manners, so I did my best not to stare, but I was 10. So like any 10-year-old would probably do, I kept glancing up, and kept doing so, thinking he'd leave any moment as he had just been standing on the other side of the street. Eventually, I felt I had cooled off enough that I could go back home, and as I started heading back, the man had begun to cross the street, making a beeline right towards me. It was then that my aunt and siblings had come walking down the street to get me, calling my name. I started walking faster towards them, and the man quickly turned around, started a different way entirely. While I thought that was weird and was eager to get home, I didn't say anything. About a month later, I was staying overnight at a friend's, and she was telling me how her dad had a restraining order against one of his old friends for being weird with her. I don't remember the exact phrasing she used, but she went on to tell me his name, which now escapes me, and how he only had one arm. And I remember thinking, oh, I think I might have seen him before. I don't really remember how the conversation went after that. It was just a few weeks after that I was staying with my aunt and grandparents in their house, in a different town a few miles away. My mom and siblings were halfway across the state, and I hadn't gone because I wanted to spend the summer with my friends, and my mom had agreed to it. I had been playing outside on our front porch. Me and a friend were making semi-trucks honk as they went by, since the road we lived on was close to a highway, and a lot passed by. Eventually we noticed there was this red car that kept going around the block, and like I usually do, I tried not to think too much of it. Maybe they were just looking for someone. Anyway, me and this friend ended up walking down to the only gas station in town to get a soda with her allowance money. When we got there, we noticed the red car we saw earlier was parked there, and we had to walk past the windows of the gas station to get inside. The way the gas station was situated was so that these diner tables were right next to the window, so people could sit if they wanted. I happened to glance inside for one reason or another, and when I did, the man with the one arm was there, sitting at one of the tables. I freaked out and ran home to hide in my room. I wish I had told someone in my family, an adult, about all these experiences with this man, but my family life was complicated. It wasn't the first time something bad or something that had freaked me out had happened and had me scared, but like those other times, I didn't tell anyone but the friend that saw me run away. Anyway, by the next year I was living with my grandmother, who had divorced my grandfather in another state altogether, and haven't seen him since. 3. This took place when I worked at a local Walmart about 5 or 6 years ago. I was 21 at the time, and had already been working in Walmart for more than a year, so I had my share of experiences with questionable and sometimes pretty scary customers. But there was one customer who burned into my memory that I will never forget, and probably changed my life forever. It was a weekday, so it was fairly slow. I was working alone in the girls' clothing department and focusing on tidying up my area, folding clothes, organizing hangers by size, etc. I had only been about 30 minutes into my shift when a gentleman began passing by me and started to slow down. I saw in my peripheral vision that he was looking in my direction, so I looked over expecting him to have a question. What I instead got was him saying, through a painfully wide grin, was, "Hey baby," followed by a kiss blown in my direction. I furrowed my brow and pursed my lips in confusion, unsure of whether he was just trying to be funny, or was truly that god-awful at wooing women. He made his kissy face for what was probably a full minute, and while I studied him awkwardly, I couldn't help but realize that his sense of style seemed to be very heavily influenced by that guy Pauly D from Jersey Shore. Same hairstyle, clothing style, the whole shebang. It was actually kind of amusing. After blowing his puckered kisses, he moved along, and I continued my work. For the next hour, I saw him pass by in the same direction many more times, at least 6 or 7, that I could count when I was actually paying attention. And the first 2 times he did the same thing, calling me baby and blowing his kisses. It started to get obnoxious after the 3rd time, so I moved farther into my department and faced the opposite direction when I saw him passing. He responded by changing his path and was now walking directly through the neighboring clothing sections, and was slowly getting closer and closer with each passing, as if he were circling in like a shark around my figurative boat. The longer he circled, the more my gut clenched. Eventually he directly approached me. He reached out and lightly caressed my hair from behind me, and held it in his fingers for a couple of seconds. I had very long hair, so he wasn't right up in my face with his hand or anything, but still, ew. I turned around to see him holding my hair, and I took it back into my hands, wide-eyed. "You have very beautiful hair. You're so beautiful." "Thank you?" I didn't want to snap due to fear of getting myself in trouble. And plus, since I was deeper into my department, there weren't exactly a lot of other people around that could see me anymore, and I didn't want to set him off if I got an attitude. I started to slightly shake with mild anxiety and felt my face get hot as my blood pressure rose. My gut was screaming at me that something was seriously wrong about this guy. Again, he carried on walking without another word, but he winked and blew another kiss. It was then that I realized that the cart he had with him only had 2 items in it, so he had been circling my area for more than an hour, and most likely wasn't even truly shopping for general merchandise or food anyway. I decided this was a good opportunity to take a break and ran off to hide in the break room for the usual 15 minutes I was given. While I was in there, I saw my coworker, a good friend, let's call him Chris, come in, and I told him briefly about what was going on. Mainly just that a guy had been circling around me and calling me baby, but that was all I could squeeze in before I had to go back to my post. He expressed that he found it creepy and told me that he was due to clock out in a couple of hours, so he'd check on me on his way out to see if the guy lets up. 2 hours seemed like more than enough time for him to leave, right? I mean, maybe he was already gone since I wasn't in my department for those 15 minutes anyway. Well, I didn't necessarily see him. I kept looking over my shoulder expecting him to come from behind me. I even kept my hair over my shoulder in front of me, so it wasn't flowing down my back anymore. And I became more and more paranoid as it started to sink in that this complete stranger just made physical contact with me in a way that I wasn't comfortable with, and I wasn't sure if he would do it again or do worse. The unknown was frightening. I kept working in this anxious state as I made my way over to the girls' jeans shelves and began removing wadded piles of jeans to fold. That's when I saw him again. He was behind the shelves, watching me there for God knows how long. I mean, an hour and a half is a long time to not physically see him, but realizing he never actually left the store like you'd hoped. When I saw him, I let out a short gasp, dropped the jeans and backed up with my hands to my chest. He gave a shit-eating grin with a sly chuckle. He walks around the shelf and asks, "Did I scare you?" "Yeah, in fact you did." I heard the fear in my voice this time, and I'm certain he did too. He apologized, but didn't leave. He instead asked me questions he had no business asking. I gave every single one with a vague or sarcastic answer. What time do you get off work? Not soon enough. Where do you live? Not around here. Do you like to hang out anywhere after work? Anywhere that's with my boyfriend. How long you been with your boyfriend? A long time. Eventually he realized I wasn't giving him the desired information he wanted, so he moved along once more, but this time saying he'd be back later. I took out my phone to check the time after this, and that's when everything dawned on me how much worse this was than I initially thought. He had been here for almost 3.5 hours. Not only was his dedication scary enough, but what was worse was I was only working a half day, meaning my shift was over in less than an hour, and I was truly and utterly afraid that he was going to follow me to my car, or worse, home. As I looked at my phone in horror, almost as if I physically called him, Chris came by after clocking out as he'd promised. My face was bright red, and I felt as though I was going to have a panic attack. I told Chris that the man was still here, and he was getting worse. I told him everything as fast and quietly as I could, in case the Polly wannabe came back before I could finish. Chris, I don't know what to do. He's still circling me like a shark, and was watching me from behind the shelves. He was asking me a bunch of questions I didn't want to answer, and he's wondering what time I'm off work. Chris, he fucking touched and caressed my hair. I don't know what to do. I have 30 minutes left in my shift, and I don't know what this guy is capable of or what he's planning. I don't even know the guy's name. I'm scared and I don't know what the fuck to do. Chris asked which way the guy went so he could see him for a description. And I told him that if he waited for a few minutes, he would come back on his own. So he did, and he tried to distract me with a normal conversation to calm me down. And about 5 minutes in, here he comes. I told Chris to act normal, and let him know that this guy was coming up on my right. We kept holding our conversation as Chris casually glanced over. I held a fake smile for a moment, as though our conversation was going ever so well, and I looked over with my eyes. Polly wannabe was glaring at Chris, daggers that could cut thin air locked in his direction, touching his head as he passed by. Chris played dumb, as though he didn't notice, and said out loud that he's going to go grab his stuff, and turned his head back toward the back room, despite the fact that he was on his way out the door. After Chris left, my creepy admirer came right back up to me, as though he were waiting for that, bumping me lightly with his cart, asking if that was my boyfriend. I told him that he wasn't, although I probably should have lied now that I think about it. He began asking if I could get him a job there. What? And started asking me more questions about what I usually do, what departments I work. Again, I gave vague answers, not that it would do much good because no matter exactly where I'm at work, I'm still somewhere in the building and could be found rather easily. As he's holding the Q&A, I see 2 managers, a man and a woman, walking into my department, as Chris passes by giving me a reassuring nod that Polly wannabe didn't see. The managers just stood there watching us. I looked over at them with the cry for help in my eyes, and they inched closer. The creeper took notice and turned to me silent for a moment. Am I getting you in trouble? The last words I spoke to him were, "It's not me that's about to be in trouble." The jig was up. He left his cart, that still had the same 2 items in it, and power walked out of the store. The managers came to me and asked if he was bothering me, and I told them everything. The shark circling, the watching from behind shelves, the uncomfortable questions, the hair touching, everything. And topped it off with the fact that it went on for what was now almost 4 hours. They told me that they would check the cameras and see if they can get a good shot of his face, so security could keep record of the incident in case he returned. Also to see if he bothered anyone else. Then they asked one of the other managers to walk me to my car after my shift, and to wait until I pulled out of the lot before returning indoors, to make sure I wasn't obviously being followed. I made it home without any safety issues, but the fear still lingered. I could never return to work without the paranoia again. I worked there for a little more than a year, and he never ended up coming back. that I saw anyway, but I never forgot him. I kept constantly looking over my shoulder when I worked alone, and feared that he'd return. And any time the fear began to disperse, I had nightmares that would remind me of him. Those nightmares came and went up until about 2 years ago. Even though I know the situation wasn't as bad as it could have been, my overthinking and anxiety kept repeating "what if?" and making me think about what he could possibly have had planned had he succeeded at sticking around until I left for the day. It affected my ability to go anywhere in public alone, even to this day. After the nightmares finally stopped, however, I was in for a surprise that I may not have been overthinking things as much as I thought, that my gut feelings were correct. His mugshot showed up in my news feed in July of 2017. The local sheriff's office was looking for him and found him shortly after. He was wanted for stalking, apparently going to businesses, and picking out women to hang around. Watch and harass was a hobby of his. Exposing himself to women, masturbating in front of a store where he was watching women work through the window, grabbing a woman's breast, and grabbing a woman between the legs. He pleaded no contest to these charges. As I looked at his mugshot in disbelief, I took the opportunity, now having his name, to look into his criminal history. On top of the most recent charges I just listed, he had been arrested for many counts of different types of battery on people, of many different ages, one being older than 65, which is really low. And at least one count included him being armed, but the charge that hit me hardest was that about a year before my encounter with him, he was charged with kidnapping. Whether or not something of that nature was what he had planned for me, I may never know, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. I consider myself very fortunate that I didn't have it as bad as the other poor souls he was able to get his hands on, and thanks to Chris and the managers that watched over me. Why this man was able to walk free for so long, despite his consistent, disgusting actions, is a mystery, and I don't know what his sentencing was last July. But if the justice system lets him roam once more, all I can say is that I hope we never meet again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 293. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Also apologies if my voice sounds a little bit rougher than usual in the past couple of videos. I had one of those acid refluxy nights over the weekend. Entirely my own fault. I was having far too much of a good time at the weekend. There was pizza, there was sugar, there was soft drinks. But the 30 minutes during which my throat was burning, when it woke me up, perhaps wasn't necessarily worth it. Well, these things happen. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.